Madam Vice Mayor, if you would like to call your meeting to
Thank you.
order, you are now able to do so.
All right. I am hereby calling a special meeting of the Reno City Council to order. And I would like to ask Dylan, since he's our special presenter today, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thanks, Dylan. Great job. Can we have a roll call?
Yes. Breckus? Dewar?
Here.
Delgado absent. Weber? Here. Jarden absent at this time. Reese?
Here.
Oh,
Oh, Jarden on the phone.
Jarden is present. Thank you. Shivi absent. Madam Vice Mayor, you do have a quorum of the Reno City Council.
All right. Thank you very much. Our next item is public comment.
We have public comment in general category from Sam Dene today.
Thank you.
Sam Dene, the heart and soul and the body and mind of Reno government, and the guard angel against media wacko freaks and government bureaucrat bungling. We have two special guests here today, Luke and Pedro from Reno High School. So that will verify that they've made their assignment here in case their teacher wants to verify. This is all live on TV, and I'm going to have it on YouTube probably tomorrow. Luke and Pedro came down here, and you know, they're the epitome of what is wrong with Reno. The Reno media wacko freaks, the epitome. I guaranteed them I was going to put on the best show extemporaneously, not even knowing what I'm going to talk about, but it came to my mind. These guys are the epitome of what is wrong with our wacko freak media. The Reno Gazette, Anjanette Damon, those two Sam characters, and the Joe Hart and all his gang, reading their teleprompters. First of all, they're fairly good writers. They're fairly articulate. They just don't know how to tell the truth. They don't know how to tell the truth. The Reno Gazette is just a bunch of bold-faced lies. Well, they're not liars, but not telling the truth and leaving it out is as bad, maybe worse than a lie. And so I asked these young men before the meeting started, had they ever heard of Sam Dene? And they said no. And there is the problem, that they have never heard of this man right here who has done more for Reno than the next 50 people added together. I'm responsible for 92% of the good things about Reno, and I do it all philanthropic, out of my heart, out of my heart. I don't ask for anything. I do it for the people back there. I do it for all these people. I do it for Luke and Pedro to try to make Reno a better place. But because we've got the most diabolical, corrupt, mendacious, perverted, deceptive, rotten, evil media in Reno, here it is the feast Friday of the Easter Passover, and here I am. I was going to try to come down here and be a really nice guy and talk about Easter and wonderful things like that. Happy hour coming up here in a little while, along with my designated driver, nice smiley face. But I start thinking about the media wacko freaks. What an unbelievable disservice they are to Reno. And they all know it. They all know it. They don't like him. They love me for coming up here and castigating the media whack. Not the camera guys. He's just over there taking pictures, but they're not going to lie. I'm the only guy at the meeting. I'm the only citizen at the meeting, and he's taking video, and they're probably, if they find out you're taking video of me, you're probably going to get fired. I hate to say that. They will not put it on. Anyway, there's and see that clock up there, Pedro and Luke? That's the Sam Dene, do not give him one extra second of freedom of speech clock, right there. When I arrived, you could come up here and talk. And again, I've been responsible for this horrible gigafactory thing. I wish I hadn't done that. I saved the Air National Guard single-handedly, and I don't have enough time to explain how. And I'm very proud of the young men here, and I wish there would be more. Your whole class should be here today. Does anybody have any questions? Not. Thank you. And good for you for coming to the meeting.
Thanks, Sam. And thank you especially for making us aware that Luke and Pedro were in the audience. And I would like to ask them to come up and introduce themselves and tell us why they're here and fill out a card if they're interested.
You mean my word wasn't good enough to verify they're here?
No, it's a great opportunity to tell us who you are.
My name is Luke Swissig, and I'm currently a Reno High School senior, and I'm here because I need to get some more experience with the local level of government. And so it's an assignment where you have to come in, sit in a courtroom, and then go to a public meeting, get all these required hours, and just kind of really experience what local government is, how the courts work. And so I want to thank you guys for having me here and letting me come up here.
All right, that's fantastic. Would you mind going to the clerk and filling out a card? That is part of the public speaking process. It just
Perfect.
tells you who you are and a way to get a hold of you if we need to follow up.
Thank you
Okay?
very much.
Thanks.
Don't expect to ever see that kind of show again.
Okay, would you like to come up? Yes. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Pedro Carmona, and I also go to Reno High School, and I'm basically here for the same reason as Luke. And I feel like this is going to be interesting because although we've been learning about how government functions at school, I feel like it's going to be a different experience here, and you get to see how, well, I guess how it functions. Although we know how like the rules work and stuff, but you get to see how it works out. So
Fantastic. And could you say your full name again?
Pedro Carmona.
Carmona. All right. Thank you, Pedro, for being here. And then let me ask, is there anyone else in the audience who is also doing a similar
Pedro, it's going to get very boring now.
task? Are you here? Would you like to come up and introduce yourself? No? Do you want to at least just tell us your name? You don't have to make a speech. Yeah, just tell us your name and what school you attend.
My name is Estrella Ugarte, and I go to Reno High School.
Reno High. And are you doing the same basic thing?
Yes, I am.
Fulfilling your credits?
Yes.
All right, well, I hope you all are taking notes. That's awesome. And if you could just also fill out one of those blue slips, that's part of this public process too that the guys are doing.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for coming up. Is there anyone else in the audience who has not filled out a slip to speak that would like to speak at this time? All right, seeing none. The next item is approval of the agenda, and I'm looking for a motion. Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then the next thing we have is a presentation from our own Dylan Shaver on an update, discussion, and potential direction on the 2019 session of the Nevada Legislature. I'm amazed that you made it up here at 4 o'clock on this particular day at the Legislature. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam
Excuse me
Vice.
one moment. Madam Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I think it would be a good idea if we could just have you explain that this is not a normal meeting.
Yes.
To our students
Right.
especially, or either that or maybe Mr. Shaver would like to explain.
Yeah.
This isn't. But I think it would be a good idea for someone to do that.
Yeah.
So that the public knows
Right.
as well.
Okay. Well, as soon as they are finished filling out their cards, it'll probably be the best moment. Why don't we get started? And then when they're finished, we'll take a moment break.
Sure thing. Well, first and foremost, Madam Vice Mayor, I try and make sure to schedule my time with around the time it seems like most legislators have booked their flights. So it seemed like this was a relatively safe time to come and present to you today. Rather than jump around on and get into specific measures this time, like I did at your last meeting, I'm just going to give you a general overview of where we are at this point in the session. We're more than halfway through. I'll talk a little bit of some priorities that were discussed prior to the session and give you updates as to where we are on those, and then let you know about a couple of lingering concerns I've got for the remainder of the session, just so nobody's caught surprised. So first and foremost, a general overview of the session. I think that we're actually in a very good spot this session, and I've been teasing it with a couple of our department heads. I haven't even told the city manager yet, but I wanted to let you know that your bill, Senate Bill 225, that clarifies that we can use emergency 911 funds for training of police personnel and the staff that redacts the footage that we have to distribute on a public records request, has passed through the state Senate unanimously, 21-0.
That's
It will
awesome.
head to the Assembly next for what is hopefully a decent hearing, and then hopefully after that for the governor's signature. But I wanted to announce to you folks first that we have gotten that bill through half of the process.
Okay,
Now
I'm
we
going
get
to hold you right there, just so that those in the audience can follow, and especially our guest students. I want to explain that this is not a standard meeting of the City Council. Those usually happen every other Wednesday, and they usually start at 10. and they go to maybe even 10 at night sometimes, but typically around 5, 6, 7, 8, something in there. What we're doing today is we're having a special meeting for this last 1 hour of the day, may go longer, and we're having our lobbyist, our representative, really our legislative representative, come to us and tell us what has been going on at the legislature. So we have most of us here, there's someone on the phone, which is a council member, and we're all getting an update on what has been happening. So he is going to go through a packet of bills with us, or at least give us the broad overview, and then if you're interested, there is this packet, and you can see what bills we're tracking and why. And it is pretty big. It looks like there's, how many are there on here? It looks like there's
366, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
We'll go through each one of them.
Individually, in depth, for the next 5 hours. No. Okay, all right, so Mr. Shaver, I'm sorry for the interruption, but you, at least you got a sense of where we are and what we're doing here today. All right, thank you.
And if you all need extra credit, the reason the city has a lobbyist, which is pretty common amongst Western states, is Nevada is what is called a Dillon's Rule state, which has nothing to do with me, it's unfortunately.
You can only hire legislative lobbyists whose name is Dillon. That's how it works.
But also cities like Reno, any city in Nevada, our power flows through the state legislature down to municipal government. We don't have the authority to set law without their permission. So every 2 years when the legislature's in session, we have to send representatives up there to advocate on behalf of the municipality for things that will help us ensure the health, safety, and welfare of folks like you and your families.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so that's your extra credit moment for the day. So the session's going well. SB 25 has passed halfway through the session, halfway through the process. There have been a handful of bills that I have talked to you about our concerns with before. Assembly Bill 101, for example, which would have given anybody anywhere in the state standing to file a cause of action against the city for a procedural violation. That measure has failed. Senate Bill 168, the bill that would have allowed builders to exempt themselves from the parts of the building code in exchange for putting solar panels on the roofs of their houses. That measure failed. Assembly Bill 282, I remember you had some particular concerns about. This was the bill that went into every city's charter and made changes to how we had to draw ward lines, how big our districts could be, and that sort of thing. That bill was amended so it no longer affects the city of Reno and only applies to the city of Henderson. Assembly Bill 379, which I refer to as the universal preemption measure, which said that authority delegated to the federal government or by the federal government to the state, the cities could not do anything with that until the legislature passed it down. That bill, fortunately, fell by the wayside. Assembly Bill 132, which was a measure that would have stopped us from being able to drug test police officers and firefighters pre-employment and put a lot of our federal funding for those agencies into jeopardy. That bill was amended to protect anybody who is in a public safety role. So the bills that we've had some pretty serious concerns with have either failed the process or been softened significantly in a way that our departments are no longer concerned. And we're going to take that as a victory. You know, the first committee passage deadline was last week. The first House passage deadline, so the bills that are going to get out of the Assembly have to be out by next Tuesday. Bills that are going to be out of the Senate have to be out by next Tuesday unless they have been somehow exempted. That will give us a very clear playing field of what we really need to worry about between now and the end of the legislative session. And that's when we can really sort of come into focus. A lot of the for lack of a better word, the distraction measures will be gone, and that's when the real politics will start. Unfortunately, for any local government, that is where our bills are at the most jeopardy, right? Because we, for myriad reasons, are not a natural constituency for state legislators. So we have to be on top of it to make sure that even simple bills like ours can get to the next step of the process process because there's just always going to be another priority. So we will work diligently to make sure, particularly that the measures that we have amended stay amended, the measures that aren't going to come back stay where they need to stay. And of course, the priority bills that you have approved can live on to fight another day. I mentioned SB 25 has cleared the Senate. Assembly Bill number 4, that's the bill.
Wait, SB 25.
Yes, Ms. Prekis?
I'm sorry. That's the
That is your bill on.
that's our bill.
Yes, on 911 funds
Okay,
for body
yeah,
cams and
okay.
other things. Your other bill, Assembly Bill number 4, has not fared quite so well. That is the bill to allow municipalities to create fire protection districts. As that concept advanced through the process, there wasn't a real appetite for it amongst the committee, at least in the form that it was in. And while stakeholders were willing to move the bill if we found a way to craft it so that it applied only to the city of Reno, LCB's legal division had some serious questions about that. There are folks in Southern Nevada who very much were not interested in extending that authority to their municipalities down there. Some of our stakeholders, to their credit, the Reno Chamber and others were willing to come to the table and sit down with it. But again, LCB wasn't really willing to move it in a form that applied just to Reno. And also, the committee has nobody from Reno on it. And so that created a natural challenge. However,
Wait, which committee has no one on it? Assembly Government Affairs?
that is correct, Council.
Sometimes I like to take notes for future reference, and future reference is, why isn't a Northern Nevadan on the Assembly Government Affairs Committee? Did it start out that way? Because I think I noticed that early on.
Yes, and in fact, I mentioned that at our very first council briefing, that it was something we had to pay attention to. There's a sort of good news, bad news situation there. There are a disproportionate number of members of our delegation that are on the Ways and Means Committee, rather than the Government Affairs Committee, and those two committees meet at the same time. And so because of that, there just weren't enough to go around.
Yeah, it just seems like for time immemorial, there's always been a Northerner on Government Affairs for, both houses, and it would seem to me that it would be good for us to represent to them that we think that's important. If we do.
Thank you for that feedback, and we have had similar conversations to that with the Assembly Majority Leader, who I would note is from Northern Nevada and used to chair that committee and is avidly looking out for our concerns in that regard. But to your point, we of course do not have a role in deciding who sits on which committee, and that was just the way things shook out this time.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Please keep going on.
Of course. So that was sort of the bad news about Assembly Bill number 4. There is good news about Assembly Bill number 4. The Speaker saw that it was an issue that was important to us, and maybe further discussions around the way that we provide fire service were warranted for this session. So the Speaker granted that bill a waiver from all of the rules. So unlike the other bills that failed to make it out of committee last Friday, ours is still alive. So I think we are the only municipality that has all of their bills living, even though one is on life support. And we're going to continue to work to figure out what the best way to have that conversation about fire services at the state legislature.
Wasn't there a study bill by someone else about fire?
Yes, ma'am. You are referring to Senate Concurrent Resolution number 2, which is Senator Kiekefer's measure to provide a study of fire services in Washoe County generally. For our part, we have inundated him with information, including the most recent fire service report and other things that we've left with him. I know on the labor side that they have been giving him a lot of information as well. Our position on that measure through the fire chief has been, please come take a look. We will show you how we can provide the services we do for a fraction of what the county fire districts are charging their residents to provide that service. And at the same time, talk about the trials that we have had in doing so. You know, the city, and the chief's not here to verify me. You'll know better than I do, but I believe we have the same number of firefighters as we did in 2002. And, you know, clearly a much larger population, and that population is growing. And that is a story that frankly, I believe we would be eager to tell and tell very well in an interim study should it get to that.
Okay, so that could be the vehicle.
That said, each house gets 2 interim studies. Senator Kiekefer is a member of the minority party, so it would take some sort of deal for it seems, for that measure to be one of them. There are, I think, 6 or 7 study bills pending in the Senate right now on a wide array of things, not to mention the ones that are going through the Assembly.
Okay.
That's interesting, yeah.
So that was sort of the good news portion of the presentation, a little status update of where we are broadly speaking. I want to get into a couple of other priorities that I was sent to Carson City to talk about. And the first one on my list here is the package of affordable housing measures that are going through. They're actually faring very well. Senate Bill 398, for example, creates a specific line in Chapter 368, that is the chapter from which cities derive their authority. I'm sorry, Chapter 268. And it creates a special subsection of that chapter to say that cities have in their toolbox the ability to address affordable housing issues in their region. So it becomes part of our municipal toolbox in regulating the health, safety, and welfare of our residents.
Wait, I want to, sorry.
Yes.
You want to catch up on the
Councilwoman Breckes.
That bill in particular gives us what tool?
So if you permit me to pull it up, it does not specify a tool. Rather, it specifies more broadly in the charge for all cities, and I will pull up the exact language for you, that we have the ability to, give me just 1 second here.
It broadens the concept of police powers to the provision of affordable housing?
Well, let's just let him pull it up.
Yeah.
There's a number
Well,
of
that's
them.
what I seem to,
This is NRS 268003 defines matters of local concern and talks about things that are specific to our cities, right? And that's where we get our health, safety, and welfare language, planning, zoning, and development of land within our corporate boundary. And it adds specifically in there the development or redevelopment of affordable housing in the city or any action taken by the city to ensure availability of affordable housing in the city. And I just realized LCB has made a typo in this bill that I will bring to their attention.
okay, okay. So that's that one.
So
Yeah.
following up, though, what would that bill do for us?
I would really have to defer to the city attorney on that measure as for its practical effect, and I did not warn him that I would have to defer to him in that manner. However, cities are granted pretty broad authority to deal with, like the other things in this chapter are you have the authority to deal with nuisances, to deal with outdoor assemblies, contracts and purchasing by city government. So it puts the development or redevelopment of affordable housing on par with everything else the city is already authorized to do. So I think it becomes a sort of thing where it's really up to you what that means.
I see.
And then Mr. Hall would, of course, have to defend it in
I mean,
court.
it is odd to me that, I mean, we have been dealing with affordable housing for quite some time, but I guess you're saying very affirmatively, it gives us the authority to do so maybe in a broader way than just through home funds or something else.
That is my interpretation, though, again, this is the sort of thing that,
Okay.
like every other part of this section, would end up being defended.
Okay.
I mean, it may be more of a broad intent to put it on par and then intended to work in concert with other bills.
And to your point, Councilmember Breckes, there are other affordable housing bills. Senate Bill 103, which is the bill that allows for the abatement of sewer funds for affordable housing projects. That is a bill that we specifically worked with Senator Ratty on in the interim. That has passed unanimously from the state Senate. And its companion measure, Senate Bill 104, which requires more collaboration between the state housing division and and local housing departments has also passed unanimously through
nice.
that process. So the affordable housing sort of package of measures are moving along. I frankly lack the expertise to tell you how you would interpret and how you would use all of those things. Nevertheless, they broaden the authority of the council to make decisions on these sorts of matters.
Yeah. On a similar vein, are there any tenant protection bills that have progressed?
There is an omnibus tenant protection bill brought by Senator Kinsella. It particularly protects low-income tenants on things like, for example, you cannot discriminate against a tenant for having a bad credit history. You cannot, it tightens the timeframes, expands the timeframes whereby you can evict a tenant. There are no rent protections in those bills, though, and I know that you have brought that up before, so I want to specifically say, currently there are no rent protection bills pending in front of the legislature. There has been a conceptual amendment proposed to Senate Bill 103 that would authorize local governments to engage in rent controls, but that has not been adopted into any measure at this time.
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. So I have a section here on fire, but I've already talked about AB4 and Senate Concurrent Resolution number 2. Those are really the two big fire measures we're working with out there. The other has to do with police and criminal justice reform. And I picked up from the council at our last meeting that there was not a ton of appetite to talk about the municipal courts. Nevertheless, we are looking at these bills from a handful of different perspectives. One, of course, the deputy chief and the police department, we're getting their feedback on bills like AB 236. That's the overarching criminal justice reform bill. And we are trying to figure out how all of these bills work together in a broader administration of justice sense, because we do operate both a police department and a court. And so this week we will start treating all of these bills as one effort so that we can make sure that we understand broadly the impacts these have on our departments. Prior to deadline day, we were sort of approaching each bill individually as to how it would affect the departments. But now that we know that they're all sort of moving in a particular direction, we're going to refocus on those. And here's why. So Assembly Bill 236, the major criminal justice reform bill, that is a freight train. There's things in there that are a long time coming. A lot of ideological changes, on crime and punishment sort of measures that this council hasn't weighed in on, and I don't think intends to. But as part of that bill, a lot of felonies right now, or things that are felonies right now, will become misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are tried in the municipal court system, but some of those will require a jury trial. Our municipal court system is not set up to handle jury trials. We don't have jury boxes. We don't have anything like that. And so we have to start looking at these things sort of through that lens. Simultaneously, Assembly Bill 411, the bill that decriminalizes our traffic penalties. I don't get the sense from this council that you believe traffic penalties should be criminal. And so there's something, except for maybe the city manager who just shot me a look. But I live on Skyline where the speed limit is already 35, so I think that they should all be criminal. But Assembly Bill 416 combines with that bill to say for non-criminal penalties, we cannot put a hold on somebody's license. We cannot send them to collections to collect a debt. So basically, those two bills combined, our court administrators believe that would reduce the collections that come through the municipal court by about 85%. We would basically only get the people who got their ticket and went online the next day and paid, and everybody else would just sort of let it go because we can't put it out to warrant anymore. We can't put a hold on their license. And then under AB 34, we have to give them the option to buy their way out of the points we would put on their license. So we take all of these as one measure, and it radically changes the way both our police and our court system conducts business. And so we're trying to embrace all of these bills as a single effort and lay out to lawmakers the consequences of all of their passage. And hopefully that will give us a little more traction. To the credit of all those bills, believe it or not, are being moved by the same legislator. And to his credit, he has been very open and willing to work with us on each of these measures, and in fact has adopted several amendments that we and other municipalities have proposed.
Which legislator is this?
That is Chairman Steve Yeager of the Judiciary Committee in the Assembly. And we do appreciate, and I'll say on the record, that he has been working with us so closely and has been very thoughtful about these things. His intent is not to railroad our court system or anything like that, but these are issues that have been important to him and to a certain constituency for a long time, and now they see their opportunity to move them.
I will say I have heard concerns about these bills. I mean, you said jokingly that, speeding to you is criminal, and I have many constituents that, the speeding has resulted in property damage. I have one section in my ward where 10 houses in a row, different houses, maybe it's 8 of 10, have been hit by speeding cars, which seems almost impossible. But they have, and they've all been documented. They filed police reports. The police recently went out and did a speeding sting, enforcement. And the very first person that came by was going 67 in a 25, and they actually arrested this person. And what I'm concerned about is these more egregious cases. I already have enough trouble in my ward with speeding, and it's one of the most common complaints. So I'm looking for some balance here, I guess. I also agree that this should not be a felony. Everybody speeds. At some point in their life has accidentally or on purpose sped. But the question, and maybe got a ticket. The question is, moderation in this, not having to go to jail for months at a time due to speeding. But on the other hand, if you're DUI, if you've caused property damage, if you've hurt somebody, if you hit their car, I've seen all of that. I guess I'm wondering where the balance is.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I will say for my part that I was only partially joking. You and I believe, live in basically the same neighborhood, and
Yes.
it's pretty terrible. The disregard people pay to the traffic laws as it is. And so basically eliminating penalties, and it's obviously not just specific to our neighborhoods, it's citywide. Councilmember Breckus very early in the session expressed to me concerns that we were not doing enough about traffic safety in the legislature, and frankly, we are still not.
Right.
But we have expressed that exact concern both on the record in committee and behind closed doors. Yeah, I don't think that there's anybody who wants me to go to Carson City to defend our ability to throw somebody in jail for having an expired registration, but we need to preserve the tools that we have to both protect the safety of our streets and also, frankly, the way the legislature has set up the system of governance that we have at the local level here. This is how our courts are funded, whether they like it or whether we like it or not.
Right. And I was going to follow up on that. It looks like I'm on the clock like everyone. I don't want to overly hamstring our judges. We expect our judges to be thoughtful and judge-like and to mete out justice appropriately. Don't put someone in jail for going 26 and a 25. On the same hand, don't let that person going 67 and the 25 also not go to jail and have no consequences. Right. So, and I've heard a concern, I think, throughout the municipal court system about that. So I want to reiterate that on their behalf, that they need the tools to do the job that they have to do as well.
Well, and just to add on with Assembly Bill 434, one of the chairman's concerns is that local jurisdictions are imposing court fees rather than fines for things that are state violations. Driving without registration, driving without a license, those are state violations, and theoretically the ticket part of that should go into the permanent school fund and not to the locality. And he believes that local governments are coming up with other penalties and charging people with those. What we pointed out, both on the record and behind the scenes, is that there may be a drop-off in those because, according to our police department, we're enforcing traffic infractions significantly less over the years. Exactly. As our police force has gotten smaller, basically on a per capita basis, they are spread more thin, and our ability to issue those citations is already diminished as it is. As you can see, this is a very large conversation for us, generally speaking. And I try to, every time I testify, remind them that our municipalities in this state do not have the ability to go out for new revenue like the legislature does. Every time they impose a new requirement, every time they restrict our ability to collect revenue from a source, we don't have the ability to go and make up for that somewhere else. It has to come out of an existing pot. And this city in particular for years has been, trying to divide the pie into smaller and smaller pieces. And I believe that's something that will come to a head in the long run. Or, as the city manager and I like to discuss, if they want cities just to be police and fire departments, then that's something that really the legislature should proclaim.
Okay, all right, shall we move on?
Absolutely. So I wanted to wrap up on a couple of concerns that I have as we go into really the hot phase of the session. The first and foremost is over workers' comp. We have seen, and we see this every session, there are a litany of work comp bills. Work comp is, basically how you make an injured employee whole should they have to leave the workforce or after they have retired. And there are a lot of reforms going through the pipeline. And again, I have to be clear when I'm testifying on these, the city's position is, of course, that a worker has a right to be restored if they're injured in the workplace or if they develop an occupational disorder after years of work or something like that. But the question is always, where would you like us to pull to pay for these things? One example of that is there's a bill to include post-traumatic stress disorder in a workers' comp filing. And I don't think that any of the 7 members of the council would stand up and say, no, that's not something we should pay work comp on. But the cost to governments across the state would be somewhere between $20 and $30 million a year. And I don't have the number just for Reno. It's difficult for our folks to turn that around quickly, but it is the kind of thing where we say, yes, this is a great idea. Tell us how we would fund this, because when they pass these things down, they rarely ever provide for such considerations.
Well, just a quick question on that one.
Yes.
I thought workers' comp was about getting injured on that job, not some previous job. But are you saying that the PTSD would have been a result of, let's say, working at the city of Reno, in their capacity there?
Well, I cannot speak for the manager or myself. I believe that they're referring specifically to folks who are in the line of duty, the police officers and firefighters. Yes.
Okay. Is this AB 138?
Let me pull up my cheat sheet. No, AB 138 was a measure to move from the clear and convincing evidence standard for determining whether or not somebody had developed a condition on the job to a preponderance of the evidence standard, and that measure failed.
So this bill is dead, AB 138?
AB 138 is
okay.
dead, that is correct.
So which is the bill that we're talking about?
I am looking for that in my notes, council member, if you would give me just one second. This is Assembly Bill 492.
Assembly Bill 492.
AB 492, that is correct.
Let's see.
And before we,
okay.
I just want to note, I'm sure we're all aiming for this meeting to go within an hour, but before we do end the meeting, I want to make sure that you do touch on the depreciation resolution. I
Yes,
just want to make sure that's covered.
It is in my
Okay.
packet.
So AB 492, we are pending department review. So have we spoken in favor or against this or conveyed any thoughts?
The only thoughts we have conveyed are the ones that I expressed to you previously,
Okay.
that this is maybe a fine idea. We did not weigh in on whether or not that's coverage we would provide. We
Okay.
just weighed in with concerns over what it would cost us.
Okay.
And in doing so, again, we are not the only local government working in the legislature. There are a lot of sort of local governments, and so we have sort of a little workers' comp working group that
Okay.
we get together
Okay.
and try and provide amendments, in particular to that bill. To your question, Councilmember Dewar, there's actually nothing in the bill that would guarantee, for example, if they had seen a trauma or anything like that in their line of duty, it would be sort of a presumptive issue that they had when they filed the claim. And again, I have to make very clear, we are not opining on whether or not that is a benefit that should or should not be provided. We are saying if it is provided, we want to make sure that it is provided to the right people. And so to your point, Councilmember Breckus, those are the conversations we are having about that bill. The day that bill was heard, it was heard with a tranche of other workers' comp bills. And for my part, I testified one time with the caveat that it applied to all of the bills that were being heard that day. And it is basically, in summary, what I just said to you.
Okay, well, let's just keep watching. Yeah.
So there are other workers' comp bills, like Assembly Bill 128, which is more of a vocational rehab bill than a workers' comp bill. But it takes, right now you have a 6-month window of job placement benefits in a voc rehab situation. It extends that clear to 24 months, 2 years. And again, we want to make sure that injured employees are taken care of. But the question is, where are these resources coming from? And so similar to those criminal justice bills, and there are many others, we are looking at these work comp bills as a package and meeting with legislative leadership to say, this is what you are handing to us.
Yeah.
And in the scope of things and mandates that are handed down to the city, we just want to make sure you're aware of the impacts. And please, can we find ways to refine this to ensure that they apply only when they need to apply?
Okay.
Yeah. Similarly, Councilwoman Breckus, your favorite bill, the tort cap measure, taking the sovereign immunity for a government in Nevada from $100,000 all the way up to $250,000, and adding a $1 million penalty for gross negligence. That gross negligence piece has come out of the bill. It is now just a 2.5 times multiplier on the cap itself, so taking it from $100,000 to $250,000. The proponents of that measure are very much trying to put in there that figure would be pegged to inflation, and have even offered out that they would accept a lower amount if it were pegged to inflation. I countered back to them that if they peg every other number that reflects local governments, whether it's in our purchasing or prevailing wage or anything like that, and peg that to inflation, we might be able to have a conversation. It didn't go over great, but these are sort of like little subtle things that drive at frankly operational costs. What I don't ever want to do is have these bills sail through the legislature, and then we are here in your budget process 3-4 years from now having to explain why we have more people and even fewer dollars in the pie to divvy around.
Which bill was that?
I'm sorry, the tort cap bill, I didn't note the number here, but if you give me a moment, I believe it's
Okay.
Senate Bill 245. I just want to...
245. That didn't get on our list, but okay.
Really?
Who's the sponsor?
Senator Orenshaw.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, for whatever reason, that's not on your spreadsheet there. We have had a couple of technical glitches with the way the
Program.
tracking system
Okay.
does reports, but
Okay.
yeah, I have that as SB 245. So if that's not on your
Okay.
list, we'll
245. Okay.
make
Okay.
a note to double check those before you get the next one.
Okay.
And then third and finally, and things that I have concerns about, to your question, Councilmember Dewar, is Senate Joint Resolution 14 of the 79th session. This is the bill that, or the measure that, among other things, would create a ballot question to allow for the reset of property values at the point of sale for those properties. Since it is a constitutional amendment passed through the 79th legislature 2 years ago, would need to pass through this legislative session in its exact same form, and then be approved by the voters in the 2020 election. We have been waiting for a report from Applied Analysis that demonstrates the overall impact to local governments. And those of you who have worked with Applied Analysis and Mr. Aguero before, he is very, very thorough in his analyses. So he has provided an impact all the way down to, I believe, the Verdi swimming pool district, the effect of the measure on local governments. I only have Reno's here in front of me. It is a 377-page document to go over the overall impacts. But for Reno, just so this council knows, in its first year after passage, it would earn about an additional $5.6 million for the city. And then after about 10 years, would the difference between what we make under the current system and the new system would be about $31 million a year. So we're talking about significant sums over the course of the decade, about $203 million in total. So the Aguero report does a good job demonstrating the impacts it would have. It does not do a great job demonstrating the need. And last session, to get it through the first time, Senator Ratty relied pretty heavily on focusing on the needs of local governments. And again, that's something that the city manager and I presented on very early in the session to the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. The way that we fund local governments in this state will, we specifically stop local governments from adjusting their income with inflation under the 2005 property tax changes. So, it is stripping local governments a little bit of their income. Nevertheless, in failing to demonstrate the need in this report, which it wasn't really intended to do, we sort of now are in a position to have to defend these figures and what we would do with these numbers. And I think that we have a pretty good sense of what has been cut by this council over the last decade, and that would be the obvious place to look. But as I said earlier in this presentation, municipalities and counties are not a natural constituency group in the legislature. And we are partners in co-governance, and under Dillon's rule, we are sort of a lesser partner, and intentionally or otherwise, that is a bit of an attitude that prevails at the legislature when it comes to thinking about local governments. And so the question is, will the legislature want to stick their neck out to put this on the ballot? And
Well,
so
let me ask you, Dylan, if I may.
Yes.
Would it help? I think almost all of us support this in some form or fashion. I mean, we all know the needs here. We know them because we lived with them. The newer members of the council haven't been through their first budget here, but they will quickly find out that the need far exceeds just to recover where we were back in 2005, at 2019. Okay, just to recover from the recession. Never mind meet the growth that we've had here of all places in Nevada and of all places in the country. So what I'm asking you is there something that we should be doing? Should we be sending a resolution? Should we be putting in a whole package of, our own report on the needs? I mean, what do you recommend? Is there any action that we can take as a council to support you in this effort? Or in my opinion, and I think most of us share this, in advocacy to support this bill or this joint resolution.
I want to be thoughtful about
Yes.
my answer here, council member. And what I would-
Or you don't even have to answer on the spot. You could think about it.
Councilmember Dewar.
Yeah.
Vice Chair, or Vice Mayor Dewar, rather. I think perhaps the best take on it would be to really follow the lead of the sponsor. And I know that Mr. Shaver is in touch with the sponsor regularly. And so as she desires any action from us, from me or from this council, we will certainly bring that back in as speedily of a fashion as possible, whether that be official action, a letter, just testifying in support. I think it's important to take her lead and follow those directions as she is the sponsor.
Well, I just want to make sure
Feel
we're
free
being
to-
timely and that, our meeting schedule or these meetings, we don't miss an opportunity, or you don't feel like you have the authority, or, I want to be able to take a vote here and we either support or don't support at some point this bill. So I'm advocating that if we even have to have a special meeting on that topic, to me, it's one of the most important bills of the whole session. And I've made it clear to other groups that are down there. I mean, that may be risky to say, but my role here is the city of Reno. And my role is making sure to keep the city of Reno whole, making sure we meet our public safety needs. That's why we have two bills on, what are they on? Public safety. I mean, they're not on other things.
But I thought,
Yes.
I thought we
Ms.
were in
Freckles.
support of that.
We are in support of it. But I'm
Yes.
just saying, if we need to do something more than just,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, well, but I like the manager's direction.
Take on
This
that?
is about the reset upon sale, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Like getting us off Prop 13 on steroids and just
Right.
having Prop 13.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It might be illustrative to let you know what we have done
Yeah.
heretofore this session. So from the very first presentation we made, and I believe that was February 20th to the Government Affairs Committee, we noted that today, your current budget is the same size as it was in 2007, I believe. But over that same period of time, while we have the same number of dollars, those dollars are actually worth $10 million less. So when adjusting for inflation, we are seeing a declining amount of money every single year, which is hamstringing our ability to provide services. We talked about how we are I think 3 fewer three fewer police officers than the median number for cities our size per 10,000 people. I think the median's about 15 and some change, and we're at 12 and some change. We talk about how the fires, and by the way, that's the same number we had in 1991. Is that right, Mac? Thank you. And for fire, we're in a similar situation. We mentioned, and this isn't just to earn brownie points with Councilmember Breckus, that our parks budget is less than half of what it was just several years ago. And we are the epitome of doing more with less. But that has a breaking point.
Right.
I mean, and having been somebody who my last job, as you know better than anybody, working for a bunch of engineers, they can tell you can only stretch efficiency so far before you just need more resources. And, for government like ours, that moment is in the rear view. We are having those conversations. What I will say, though, to your question about timeliness is this, is I have been doing this for a long time, but each of you has relationships with elected officials that are serving in Carson City that are simply different by the nature of what you do than any relationship I could have. So over your course of normal communications with your colleagues that serve at that level, I think it would be of value to bring this up as a top priority, not just in terms of municipal governments, but frankly, in our ability to function politically. That is lowercase p politically. As a political subdivision.
Right.
But those conversations, I think, would be very, very valuable, because that is the piece that no matter how long I do this job for you, I will be unable to replicate.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there some other things you'd like to share with us before we close tonight?
That is the extent of my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take any questions, as long as you don't mind me taking a moment to look it up in my notes.
Councilwoman Breckus, I'm actually going to ask, I'm going to start over here. I might even, Councilwoman Jordan, I don't know if you're on the phone still.
I am.
Okay. Do you have any comments or questions about any bills currently pending?
But no, I think they covered everything, and not at this point.
Okay.
May I
Yes.
interrupt? Specifically for Councilmember Jordan, at our last meeting, Councilmember, you asked about a previous measure this is from the 2017 session, to spur owners of vacant lands to put their lands to use. Was it your intent, Councilmember, that we would come back to you with ideas related to that?
Yes, that was my intent.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I apologize for not having that today. I will get with staff and come back with something to fulfill that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman Jordan. I'm going to turn to Councilwoman Rebler. All righty, and to Mr. Devin Reese? Nothing today. Ms. Breckus?
Yeah, as we all know, the redevelopment agency is on our minds. Are any bills pending and related to the redevelopment agencies? I think it's NRS 278A or 279. I can't remember which.
There are a handful, council member. I am just pulling up my redevelopment list here. There are, frankly, council member, I touched on this a little bit last time. There are changes to redevelopment, but if we think back to sessions like 2009 and 2011, where there were major overhauls to RDAs and what we could do within the confines of an RDA, there is nothing of that scope. The bills are smaller, allowing, for example, I think I mentioned last time, a bill that would be permissive to allow us to return the chunk of taxes that would go to the school district to the school district. We actually can already do that under an MOU, but you know, that they are small like that. There is another one, I believe, that has to do with our ability to, for lack of a better word, give away property within a redevelopment area if it is like contiguous to somebody's property and they have been using it as if it has been theirs for a period of time. But there are no significant overhauls or changes to the redevelopment laws proposed this time around.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, we have an issue we have to deal with our redevelopment agency, and I was wondering if that section of law is open, if there's a way to kind of, for some changes there to achieve some goals. And I would hope that since we did not have the discussion on a redevelopment agency meeting at last time, that we would maybe be looking at it in the light and see if, you know, some of the scenarios we might want to go out to get us, we need a vehicle to do. And I'll tell you, my vehicle for redevelopment is I want it to be gone in the city of Reno. I don't want their ability to be used to take any more tax increment financing for anything ever except for paying off debt. And I know tax increment TIF very well. I know redevelopment pretty well. And I'm being very explicit if people are following. And so if there's a way to get something like that in our situation into a bill so that it's a done deal, I would appreciate that. And that may be what is going to be needed for me to vote and indebt the city on those redevelopment bonds. So I'm making that very public.
Well, let me just say before you go on, I mean, that kind of direction and that there's no bill to vote on, and, you know, I'm not sure, I would like to know more about where you're going. I don't object to the concept of not getting in more debt or having those tax increment goes away, because that's really been hurting us as well. I mean, just as a city as well. But I don't know that we're in a position to vote on a measure because there is no measure right today. So I don't know quite how to parlay that or parry with that.
Procedurally speaking, Madam Vice Mayor, I believe that there is a legislative report on your agenda for next Wednesday.
Okay.
It is possible if the council would so desire. My understanding from the city attorney's office is that you can take a vote on any measure proposed to you that's in front of you on this list and that's posted with the agenda. So I think procedurally you could do so then.
Okay.
And you could say that you would support such and such a redevelopment bill with certain proposed amendments in concept or an idea. I don't know that this body has ever done that, and I want to make very clear, not encouraging or discouraging that behavior, but procedurally, I think that would be how you would approach that.
Okay. And I'm asking because I have one very similar basket, and so I just wanted to know how to proceed. Did you have something else? I
Yeah, just
interrupted
to kind of close up is when this body went down and asked to extend redevelopment agencies last session, I made these same exact comments. And now it's really hitting us in the face, this bond, this debt reissuance. And I've been looking at what California did when they kind of tore up redevelopment agencies. And I'm asking someone somewhere to do some analysis into a statutory framework that would allow a redevelopment agency to exist in some fashion only to pay the debt and still be gone, because otherwise we're gonna have to go through the mechanics of redoing the plan, issuing more debt. I don't want it on the table. I don't know if everyone's at the point of understanding and comprehending redevelopment agencies, but
what the
we
impact
go
would
upside
be.
down on these bonds before we have the time to look at it again in 2021.
Right. Okay, well, we'll take that up and
Yeah.
was
I have
there?
a few others too.
Okay, so I'll just say one and then I'm going to ask you to go with the last few minutes. Yes, Mr.
I want to
Reese.
interject on this topic, though.
Sure.
I want to make certain that Mr. Shaver understands that my guess is the type of relief that Councilwoman Breckus is asking is something that is better put into an interim study or something in the interim. I mean, we're at a point in the legislative process where we're not getting that overhaul of development agencies in this legislative cycle. So if it's something that we're interested in, it's certainly something that could occupy your time in the period between the two sessions.
If I may comment.
Yeah, please.
I would say that given the point in the session and the complexities around redevelopment areas, that should the council make a decision for something along these lines next Wednesday, the likelihood for success, just again, given the complexities of redevelopment areas, would be fairly minimal by my analysis.
What did you say, though?
The likelihood for success would be minimal,
Yes.
just given how complex the topic is and
Right.
how many entities are affected by redevelopment
Exactly.
areas. I do have some expertise in that, having represented the city of Henderson during those big redevelopment fights. But even so, I believe our city manager was in on some of those same conversations. They were very long and developed over the course of years and not weeks. But if it is your wish, I will talk to, I believe it's Mr. Jensen, in the next couple of days, so that we can be a little more educated about the way things are. And if you'd like to have that discussion at your next meeting, we certainly will. But again, I just want to make sure that I'm not over-promising. Anything you decide at that point, we are inserting very late into the process.
Well, that was my gut feeling, is that, some overhaul of redevelopment districts is not at this magic moment to happen. And that was exactly my thought. And I didn't know what you were really proposing, Councilwoman Breckus, so I'm certainly willing to entertain it and have a discussion about it. And even as someone said, if there's an opportunity to have a study session on it at some point, I think that's a very good idea. But I'm certainly not in a position to vote on anything related to it right now. I'd like to just bring up one too that I've discussed a while back, and I promised Mr. Shaver some information, and that is 10 years ago, I was part of getting a bill passed that authorized local government to do home elevation programs. And that was put on a sunset, and it sunsets this year in 2019. And I promised that I would send you what the bill was, and if there's an opportunity to remove the sunset. I mean, it's been a good program. It's just one more tool in our toolkit, so I'd hate to lose some authority and have to do a whole nother bill to get that authority back when it could simply be a removal of a sunset. So, I just wanted to bring it up here and maybe discuss it in more detail, perhaps on Wednesday. So that's something important to me. It was very well vetted through the legislature 10 years ago when it passed. And a sunset was only put on it because I think the members at the time weren't sure how it would be used. And so that's an issue on my mind, is not to lose something we already gained.
Vice Mayor Dewar, is that a current bill that
There's no bill.
exists?
So there's an existing law
Okay,
that
which
sunsets in
but there's
2019.
No legislation to extend it.
No. And so, but, a lot of things happen at the end of the session. And, if that's something that happens, that's a simple strike a sunset sentence and leave the bill, leave the law intact. So.
I would be comfortable, council member, on your meeting of January 9th, when you passed your legislative operations plan, you granted pretty broad authority to the city manager and to this department to pursue things that are enabling for local governments and municipalities. So unless there is particular objection, I would be comfortable at least looking into that without any specific direction.
Right. I think I even brought it up at that meeting.
That
at the very
predates
first,
me, but
yes, I'm confident I brought it up at the very first meeting. So anyway, that's it. I just don't want to lose authority that we already have.
Okay.
All right, is there
yeah.
one last comment? And
Yeah,
then
well, a few. I've been making quorums, and we haven't been having meetings, and I know it's Good Friday, but I'm here, and I'm going to bring some things up because people have been reaching out to me. AB 70 about occupancies at open meetings. I guess we testified against that. Why did we do that? What was our thinking there?
So I will take this backwards to let you know, council member, that just today we struck a deal on Assembly Bill 70, and we will be supporting its passage through the legislature. There were two primary objections that staff raised through our normal bill review process. The first has to do with meeting size, as you indicated. That bill created what I would call a reasonable efforts test to ensure that a local body had to undergo reasonable efforts to make sure that a room was sizable. What we wanted to do with that is make sure that that reasonable effort did not require us to incur additional expense in finding meeting room space. So I will give you an example. This council meets every 2 weeks, right? So if you were to have a meeting on a controversial development, which I know rarely happens here, but on a Wednesday, that packed this room, and perhaps you had a line out the door, well, then we would have to make reasonable efforts to ensure we could accommodate the people who were not here the first time. This is one of the largest rooms that the city owns, so we would likely have to go outside of our property portfolio to find space. What we wanted to do was make sure that, for example, the Atlantis has larger rooms, but on 2 weeks' notice to put up a room and provide it with all the text, that could cost us, and I know this from my old meeting planning days with the Mining Association, somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 on short notice like that. So we wanted to make sure that a reasonable effort did not require us to find that out and make that expenditure. So part of the agreement that we came to just today was there'd be new language added into that section to specify that it does not require that additional expenditure of funds.
Okay.
Another challenge with that bill, and again, something that we came to an agreement on today, was it doubled the timeframes wherein the Attorney General and then where the private entity could file a lawsuit against a governing body for an open meeting law violation. Now, my understanding in talking to the city attorney's office is going back many, many years, we have not had such a lawsuit filed in the city of Reno. Nevertheless, the current timeframes are 60 days and then 120 days after that for a private party. Well, by taking it to 120 days, which is 4 months for the Attorney General's office, and then 240 days for the private parties, that means a decision made by this council for a developer to put their land to use or for designating a park or anything like that could be challenged up to 8 months later. And just operationally speaking, that just didn't make a lot of sense from our internal folks. The supporters of the bill agreed to strike those sections today. We had other objections as well, but over the course of the negotiation process, in order to take care of the more onerous concerns, we've dropped those to allow the bill to proceed, and it will proceed as normal now.
What about the public records bill?
The public records bill, you're talking about Senate Bill 287. Senate Bill 287 was heard several weeks ago, came up for work session. Again, this is a situation where we are not working just as a city of Reno. We're working in a broad coalition with governments across the state, including the government of the state. And the challenges, I believe, as we brought up before, were not that the city does not want to be transparent. Obviously, that is a goal of the city as a body, and in my experience, it's very service-driven. Nevertheless, the way the bill was drafted, there were some technical considerations, some considerations that we believed were unenforceable. There were amendments flying back and forth, both from the sponsor of the bill, Senator Parks, from the coalition that wants the bill, from the coalition of governments. Everybody had sort of their own amendment in concept. None of those amendments were adopted at committee, and the bill was re-referred to the Committee on Finance with an exemption so that everybody could continue working. I had a call with a journalist on that day, that last day that it was up, and for the sake of his privacy, I will not name him, but It's very important when we draft measures like this, under current Nevada law, the public records law is to be interpreted as liberally as possible in favor of the requester of the records. And so when we make changes to that, we have to be very cognizant of the unintended consequences. And I tried to make clear over the course of this conversation, and will continue to try to make clear, that the intent of the sponsors, I believe, is a pure one, but it is the unintended consequences of such a measure that we are deeply concerned about. And we want to make sure that we are not exposing the city or its staff to unnecessary peril through the legislative process.
Do we still have a $7 million note pending on this one?
Yes, that is correct.
Can we, by Wednesday and in the packet, get a breakdown of that note and confirmation that that is still your interpretation, Madam Manager, that $7 million would be a cost to the city of this? Because I understand that we are way out of line from other jurisdictions on the fiscal note that we put in, and I'm trying to understand the whole public records operations that we are faced with that I hear is a challenge and we're trying to address. So I'd like to kind of have a little more detail on that.
Certainly.
And then
Okay, Ms. Breckus?
one last one.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, wait, just stop for
Yeah.
just 1 minute. I've let you go 3 minutes over.
Okay.
You are bringing up very good points that we all need to know about, and I'm just trying to balance the time and your
Yep,
great
yep.
discussion. So if you want to do one more, I'm
Yeah.
willing to allow
Yeah.
that. So.
AB 456, we opposed the minimum wage bill. Which minimum wage bill, what was that, and why did we do that, and what do we think the minimum wage should be? Because I was surprised to see that. We had actually, at one point, this body tried to get a living wage provision here at the city of Reno. That's
Councilmember,
direction to the manager.
The spreadsheet that you have here lists the positions that, and I'm realizing this now, lists the positions that departments have recommended. We did not oppose that measure. And in fact, in having conversations with the affected departments and with the city manager, the department that urges to weigh in that direction actually dropped their opposition.
Okay.
So,
Oh, that's good. That's
This is, what you're seeing here in some of these cases are the notes that folks put into the system.
Okay.
But yeah, not only did we not oppose that measure, but I had the conversation that I just had with you with some folks in the legislature.
Okay, and I know you dropped in midstream, and maybe next year time you'll do the template different. It's just that housing affordability is a two-side street. It's the wages and it's the housing costs, and one or the other has to go. Thank you.
And good for you. Thank you for. I mean, I don't think that this council would have opposed an increase in the minimum wage. I don't know what the magic number is or where they land, but I think we all know that $8 plus or $7 plus is not the right number.
So just by way of background, the department that weighed in there, and I think we've only got the one that even has minimum wage employees, was concerned about the immediate jump from 8 to 12, but that's not what the bill does. The bill increases it, I believe, by $1 in the first year and then 75 cents every year for 4 more years to get to 12. That gives the department in question the ability to budget for it regularly, rather than come here with an increased labor
Right.
cost of 50%. And so
Right.
they're much more comfortable with that.
Okay.
And I think, philosophically speaking, between the manager, myself, and all of you, I think that we all agree with the point you just made.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm going to move at this time to our final public comment. Would any of our visiting students like to make closing comments?
To those students, I apologize that you had to hear all of this.
No, we don't apologize. This is a really important part of your lesson in civic responsibility, is knowing what is going on in the world. So thanks for being here today. With no general public comment, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, we are adjourned.